Greetings in the name of Ngayami and Yasantua, all that is good and great, all that is blessed and beautiful, all that is creative and conscious, and all that is positive and possible. May all your blessings be infinite like the night stars, and all good things be never ending. Hotep, I am Adisa Olobayo Bankole, your host to Mindvibes, thoughts from a curious mind, a bi-monthly podcast series exploring and examining social phenomena then and now. Now, in a recent conversation, I was dealing with a liberal white friend of mine, and he was dealing about the Ukraine situation and how he was feeling. And so I titled this Family Racial Affinity. Okay? But before we begin, hit that like button, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Now, family racial affinity. Quote unquote. You can't leave because your heart is there. But sure, you can't stay because you've been somewhere else. You can't cry because your look broke down. But you're crying anyway because you are all broke down. It's a family affair. It's a family affair. It's a family affair by Sly and the Family Stone. Family, racial affinity, the need to identify with self. Now, like I said in the beginning, recently I was conversing with my liberal white friend. The conversation was pleasant as always. However, he struck me by what he had said. He was lamenting on the Ukraine situation. Now, that didn't bother me, but what struck me is what he said. He had commented on how he was feeling because, as he puts it, the people of Ukraine resembles him. Now, get what I said. He's lamenting about the Ukraine situation because, as he puts it, the people of Ukraine resembles him. That his empathy for them was far greater than it would be if the attacks were against brown or black people. Now, this is curious, because he's a very liberal white friend, man. He may not go marching for Black Lives Matters and stuff, but yeah, he understands that stuff, and he was, very much into the civil rights movement. But yet, he is making this statement about his affinity to the Ukrainian people. In fact, he further elucidated on this by dealing with racial connection as being normal, as just how human beings are. How we as a species tend to gravitate towards those who resemble us. Though this in and of itself was not an earth-shattering revelation, since, as he said, it's human nature. However, it is the fact that he felt the need to express these feelings to me. Though I was not puzzled by this per se, it struck me, however, as being out of the ordinary for him. And again, the reason is because, he's very much this liberal, friend that's like, hey, he deals with the plight of the blacks, the brown people, the immigration things. He deals with that, But in this instance, I guess, for some reason, he felt the need to let me know how he was feeling. All human beings are comfortable with familiarity. We tend to be at ease when dealing with those from our own skin tone or our experiences, and indeed our culture. And even though the Ukrainians are not, as he is, Italian, they are, however, Europeans. But most importantly, they are quote-unquote white. Again, this is not a bad thing. We even see this being played out with white news reporters reporting on the devastation that Ukrainians are suffering. The amount of emotion that they are dealing with, the visuals they are showing at the horrors that's being inflicted upon Ukraine. And like I said, nothing wrong with my liberal friend and other Americans like him to feel this way. And although I don't expect that same emotions toward us as Africans or other brown people when we are undergoing similar atrocities, however, what I do expect, not sympathy or empathy perhaps, but an understanding that this is just human and not a genetic aberration. So again, here I'm dealing with, you see, quote unquote, black on black crime, and your horror at it, and you're dealing with this as some sort of displacement of genetics. This is just what we do, and yet you're seeing this situation in Ukraine happening not from anybody else, but from their own, maybe not Ukrainians, but from Russia. And they're white, and they're in the same neighborhood as Ukraine. Nor should they expect those of African diaspora or diasporas and other people of color to have your quote-unquote white level of emotion towards the Ukrainian people. Yes, what is occurring is horrific. Yet, so is what has and still is happening in many parts of the world where black and brown people inhabit. Though I appreciate Brother Malcolm, I think his name is Malcolm Vance, lending his service to Ukraine's situation, yet why not render your services to African countries who are suffering in many ways? Now this, again, like, okay, Brother Malcolm, okay, cool, you want to do that. But I have, all the time that I've seen you on MSNBC and CNN and given your expertise in counterculture stuff, I have never ever seen you dealing with what's happening in Africa or what's happening in the Caribbean or any place else where black and brown people are inhabiting. So I said, okay, you could do that, but hey, what about your own? This situation in Europe is not the first time it occurred, and even when it is over, may not be the last. As with anywhere humans inhabit it, regardless the reasons, it's perhaps just being human. As with my liberal friend, I don't expect the level of empathy towards us as African people regarding our internal struggles, because again, as my friend points out, there is a different level of feeling when it's happening to one of your own. There tends to be a disbelief that this level of barbarism is taking place. However, if this is the case, this just being quote-unquote human, then perhaps one should accept this as being just human, happening when it involves blacks and other people of color, and not a genetic disposition. So, I mean, you can't, continue to deal with this aghast about the quote-unquote crimes that are happening in Chicago or the uptick of crimes that happen in New York City or anywhere else, or those things that happened back in the 60s, the riots where you were dealing with the blacks dealing with their own communities. You can't deal with the fact that somehow or another this is abnormal. If this situation is happening in Ukraine, and it is happening by Russia, which is next door to Ukraine, and you say, well, it's human, then the same analysis you give to that situation, you need to give to African people. And although I'm not saying that it should happen, no, we should have peace, we should have harmony, we should have humanity. But if you're going to use that same idea as my friend did, that this is, the affinity that he feels towards Ukraine is not the same that he would feel for blacks, then you have to give African Americans and other people of color that same level of analysis. But here's the question I posed to my friend. Would his feelings be different if Ukrainians were under assault from, let's say, China or Africa, as with Hiroshima and Nagasaki was under white America? Yes, my friend is correct. Racial affinity will always be strong, being more emotionally attached to those whose appearance is similar to yours. It's just natural. I have no argument against that. But again, what I do have an issue with is when looking at blacks in Chicago, as I have stated before, or those on the continent or throughout the diaspora, then one should have that same level of understanding and not be so reticent to judge us as something other than being human. Again, affinity towards one's skin tone or cultural affiliation or anything of that nature is good. The movie, I think it was The Cave Girl or something, Dana Hannah played in it. And she was a blonde-head, blue-eye. But all the other people that she was with were black hair, brown eyes. And so they found her different. She was an outsider, And people who are outsiders are always looked on as being, suspicious. They're different. Their whole skin tone is different, their culture. And I can understand that. But you cannot place some type of genetic disposition on African people and brown people who, are fighting amongst themselves as something terribly wrong when you're seeing the same thing. And let's face it. Like I said, this has happened in Europe before. Europeans have always been, fighting among themselves. But it's also happened in China, also in Japan, and also in Africa. We've always fought among ourselves. That's just being human. But you can't make your what you're feeling for Ukraine as something more affinity to being human, and then look at what's happening with blacks against blacks as being abnormal. That's just insanity, But that also will then demonstrate your need to be white. Your need to be something more powerful, more supreme, more superior. But if that's the case, then your superiority has not served you well. And if you continue to do this type of thoughts, of looking at us as being something abnormal, then you cannot expect us to come to the table of humanity dealing with this idea that you see us differently and not seeing us as being humane. That is not going to serve humanity or go towards being a utopic society if you cannot even move towards that understanding. Now, this is my episode of Mind Vibes on the affinity, the whole idea of cultural or racial affinity, family. You know, this is my episode on that because of what my friend had said. But until next time, this is the DC Autobio Bank Holy saying, may we all strive to bend the arc of justice towards humanity and believe that peace and love can be achieved. Asante Sana.